Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good afternoon and welcome to our many distinguished guests and our DOE family. My name is Tim McLeese, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Secretary of Energy, Daniel Poneman, and I'll be your Master of Ceremony for this afternoon. Thank you for joining us today to recognize Deputy Secretary Poneman's many, many years of exceptional service to this department and to the nation. Before we begin, we have to always address the small housekeeping items. I'd ask that everyone please silence your cell phones and BlackBerries. Folks are taking the cue. As well as take a look around and find the nearest exits. In the event of an unlikely emergency, we ask that you exit the building and locate up here in Banneker Circle, which is just up the hill directly behind us. And finally, and most importantly, we ask that you enjoy the ceremony, and we look forward to the pleasure of your company at the reception immediately following. Now, please rise for the presentation of the colors and the singing of the national anthem, sung by one of DOE's own, Miss Patrice Carthorne.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail as the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets regular, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Go, right shoulder, ho!
Please be seated. Wow, who knew we had such hidden talent inside DOE here? Thank you, Patrice, and thank you to the U.S. Armed Forces Color Guard. Over the 10 months that I've served as the Deputy Chief of Staff, I've learned a lot about the Department of Energy, but I've learned more about what it's like to work for a boss that never sleeps and who runs triathlons to relax. This past weekend, I called Dan, and we were over the phone. I said, hey, I wanted to remind him that Dan, this is your last week, okay? So, you've done a lot. You've accomplished much over the last 5 years. So why don't we tone it down a bit, consider this a week of a sort of a victory lap. Yeah, Tim, you're right. Listen, I'm going to send you an email. Can you make a phone call here? I can do that. Oh, yeah, by the way, I got to go. I'm going on a long bike run. So I knew that perhaps for him it's a victory lap, but for the staff, this was going to be a pretty busy week, and it has. But it's in his DNA. He can't help it, and we appreciate that. And one might ask, why would I take such a job? It's very, very simple. After our first interview, I pondered a bit, and I said, Dan is a leader. He's incredibly smart, principled, and for me, most of all, cares very deeply about doing the right thing at all levels for our nation and the world. So I thought it was a great opportunity to work for such a talent. And I'll tell you, my first week at the department, calls me in his office, says, hey, Tim, I need to be on takeoff and landing for every decision that goes through this office. And I sat there, a little perplexed. I said, well, Mr. Deputy Secretary, there are certain decisions that require jumbo jets, long runways, big decision times. But then there are other decisions, you could probably handle it with a small Cessna, prop plane, short runways. I said, are you sure you want to be involved in every decision? And many of you who have worked with the deputy over the last several years, you already know the answer was yes. I'm not quite sure how well I accomplished that task, Mr. Deputy Secretary. You will soon find out. But today, we are honored to have several speakers who have been with Dan from takeoff and landing over the course of Dan's tenure here at the department and through several stages of his career. So it is my pleasure to introduce someone who has worked with Dan on some of the toughest challenges over the past 5 years, an intellect and a leader in his own right, White House Chief of Staff, Mr. Dennis McDonough.
Thanks for the very nice introduction. It's nice to see so many of our old friends here, many of my former colleagues around the table. Ash, I want to, before we start, because a lot of today is going to be about thanking Dan for his excellent work, I want to first thank the 4 people who made it possible for Dan to be so excellent. Susie, thank you for everything. Claire, Michael, and William, you guys sacrificed a lot of time with your dad over these many years. We're really grateful for that. A lot of Saturdays and Sundays, as well as weeknights and early mornings. So we're really grateful for that. And as I said to your mom, Dan, as a dad now, I think a lot about this is, am I going to get a chance someday to see something like this of my own kids? And I know how proud she is of you, rightly. And I know that she knows, or I hope that she knows that you're a reflection to the country of everything that she taught you. I was been thinking about these comments because obviously I'm going to miss Dan a great deal. I'm also quite excited about my good friend Liz taking over in Dan's big slot. So it's both a time of reflection, but of excitement. And I was thinking about it last night as I was reading the most recent Sports Illustrated, some of my heavy reading. It was about Derek Jeter, and this quote, this paragraph and a half caught my eye as I thought about Dan. His gift is getting others to buy into the group concept of winning. It's the Dwight D. Eisenhower view of leadership, not the simple execution of authority, but, as the former president put it, quote, the art of getting someone else to do something that you want done because he wants to do it. Getting a team to buy into everything it needs to do to win is what drives Jeter, or arguably Dan. This is apparent when I ask him, the reporter says, what he will miss most about baseball. Competing with your teammates, he says. One of the biggest things about leadership is you have to get to know your teammates. You have to get to know who you're leading because there's different buttons you push with different people. Some guys you can yell and scream at. Some guys you have to put your arm around. You can only do that. You can do that only if you get to know the people that you're working with as people. I think that's a good reflection of this guy here, Dan Poneman. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about this leader of people and what we asked him to do in very instrumental roles, not only as deputy, but as acting secretary over these last several years. We called on him to serve as the chief negotiator for the United States in Vienna in 2009 during talks with the Russians, the Iranians, and France regarding Iran's nuclear enrichment program. These were many days and many nights of nonstop negotiations over, 2.5 days. And they reached a deal at the table that would have shipped 1,200 kilograms of low-enriched uranium out of Iran. But regrettably, at the last minute, the Iranians walked away. But set the stage for the Joint Plan of Action, which to this day continues to be a very important achievement in our efforts with that illicit nuclear program. During the Libyan unrest in 2011, Dan helped to coordinate the release of 30 million barrels of oil from the American Strategic Petroleum Reserve. During the Fukushima disaster in 2011, when he and I spent a lot of quality time with many of our colleagues, he led the White House press briefings and took the lead in coordinating Department of Energy response, monitoring, and assistance to our Japanese allies in a time of great crisis. And in 2012, as Hurricane Sandy approached, Dan brought together energy sector leaders to coordinate recovery and response. And since then, he's steadily improved the department's not only ability to respond to future disasters, but to harden the infrastructure so that it can handle similar or even worse challenges in the past. He's been a leader in this area of nuclear nonproliferation issues dating back to his work for Senator John Glenn in 1975, a career that, as General Scowcroft will attest, has reflected the best that this country has to offer without regard to partisan politics, working with Republicans and Democrats along the way, making the country stronger as a result. So now, as we look to this new term with Liz's leadership filling Dan's very big shoes, we're going to miss all that expertise, all that nonpartisan, straightforward, national interest-focused work. But I'm also going to miss dearly a teammate who gave up a lot of time with his own family to be with us, and a teammate who, in the course of his efforts, not only made the country stronger, but made all of us as his teammates much better policymakers, but also much better people. So Dan, we'll miss you dearly. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. And now, as many of you know, prior to coming to DOE, Dan worked at the Scowcroft Group for 8 years and worked for many years under General Scowcroft's leadership at the National Security Council. It is my great pleasure to introduce General Brent Scowcroft, former National Security Advisor and Deputy Secretary's lifelong friend, mentor, and former boss.
Thank you very much. It's really a great privilege for me to be able to say a few words about a brilliant national servant and a dear friend, Dan Poneman. I'm going to be very brief, but let me begin with a descriptive set of terms which describe the Dan Poneman we all know so well. Dan is calm, cool, quiet, phlegmatic, imperturbable, and impeccably well organized. Now that we've settled that, all of these talents are engaged on behalf of achievement, which is Dan's middle name. despite what you may have thought. Now, to be serious, Dan's restlessness, which I've just described, is deeply embedded on behalf of achievement. For example, not only did Dan graduate from Harvard, he was a Rhodes Scholar. Not only has he twice served his country in key national security areas, he's an accomplished musician with skills in guitar, drums, and voice. And lastly, as has already been mentioned, he's a triathlon competitor. He has a passion to get things done and not to waste time in doing them. And we are all the beneficiaries of that energy and that dedication. This government of ours can only be as good as the people who serve in it. And Dan is the best of the best, not only for its own sake, but in bridging the sometimes partisan bickering to which we are all subject. Dan has twice put his energies, talents, and strategic prowess at the serving of his country. He has made countless strategic inputs to some of the most serious issues which confront us in a deadly and rapidly changing world. And so, on behalf of the American people, I want to thank Dan for deploying his enormous talents on behalf of the country we all love. Thank you.
Thank you, General. I must say you're in a much better position to describe Dan's professional idiosyncrasies than I am at the moment. But give me a couple of days. Right, now, Dan, we're going to go off script here a bit. So, this next few thing is not in the program, and I heard you. I heard that. I heard that sigh. Listen, Mr. Deputy, you might say this is somewhat of an in-flight course correction, or even we kind of left you on the runway for this decision. But I know you, by the way, if you hadn't had a chance or an opportunity to see the photos, we will rerun them again. There are very nice photos of Dan in his early stages in life through his many accomplishments here at the department. Some might say that the photos are cute. Others might say they're embarrassing. Mr. Deputy Secretary, he was not aware of that, but I will tell you, we had a little help obtaining those photos from your personal co-pilot. Thank you, Susie. Dan, we have 4 special guests who I will invite up to say a few words. And in the interest of time, I will introduce them all now, and ask that they come up one by one. I am pleased to introduce Mr. Tom Kuhn, President and CEO of the Edison Electric Institute, who is here to provide remarks on behalf of the electricity sector. Miss Stephanie O'Sullivan, Principal Deputy Director of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Mr. Mark Gabriel, Administrator of Western Area Power Administration, who will represent the DOE Power Marketing Administration. And Ms. Gina, and Mr. Deputy Secretary, as you would say, Cadieux, DOE's Deputy General Counsel for Technology, Transfer, and Procurement, who enjoyed providing you advice and counsel over the past several years. Much needed advice and counsel. Mr. Kuhn.
Tim, I'm sure that Dan also told you at one point in time, never surprise or fool your boss. But this is a special honor and privilege for me to be here at this grand event. And I first and I want to say, Mr. Secretary, and to all your colleagues here in the department, thank you for your service. The energy industry very much appreciates it, what you do each and every day for the energy business, for national security, and for your country. Wonderful speeches by Dennis and General Scowcroft, and I think they hit it right in the mark, so I need not say anything. And my quote isn't nearly as esoteric. I have one that says, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think Dan carried that out throughout his tenure at DOE. But I'm not sure anybody in the office knows who was the author of that quote or motto of his life. It was that great superhero, Spider-Man. And those of us in the industry view Dan as a true superhero. You know, I refer to him in our office as the master of disaster. Whenever something very challenging was about to happen, there was always this person that appeared that helped to avert what I call galactic catastrophe. Obviously, one of those that he was not able to use his superheroes to stop was Hurricane Sandy. And so I wanted to tell a little bit of a story of Hurricane Sandy, because as Sandy was out in the Caribbean, I called Dan and I said, you know, we have this mutual assistance program in our industry, and where companies come and help each other in this time of disasters. But that storm we see out there, I've never seen anything as bad as that. Dan said, yes, I agree. And I said, well, what do you think we ought to do? Should we take a trip out to the West Coast or get away from this thing? But basically, I told him that we are going to put together a CEO call with all of our CEOs from around the country to improvise as we go through this storm to try and get as much help as we can. And I said to Dan, would you mind getting on that call? Well, the first one was on a Friday night. The second one was on a Saturday night. The third one was on a Sunday night, and the secretary came on the line. And the fourth one, as the storm was bearing down on the East Coast, we had a surprise guest on the line, and he said, well, you got to keep it a secret, but we're going to have a surprise guest on the line, and it ended up being President Obama. Little sideline, one of my CEOs who was on that call in Nevada, his assistant came into the room and said to her boss, who is that impersonating President Obama? But it was him, and he was on the line for a substantial period of time, and at Dan's urging, made the comment that we are going to cut through all the red tape. We are going to bring in every arm of the government we can that can help the situation. And this was a major change from what we had encountered in the past. So, as you may know the story, we had C-5s loading bucket trucks from the West Coast. We had the military services giving us cots and places to stay for the tremendous amount of crews we brought in. And at the borders, we waived all the rules and brought in trucks across the border in record time and across state boundaries. So it was a major effort. We had 67. We amassed an army of virtually 67,000 people from, you know, tree trimmers, you know, the linemen, et cetera, to do this job. And it was phenomenal. And again, you know, Dan was orchestrating this across the government to bring all this help together. My friend David Owens here went over to FEMA, another first, and helped to do it from our side. And it was a true industry-government partnership that was successful. Well, we could have forgotten about it after that, but I think that Dan said, well, we need to make this a model in the future, which we did. So for future storms, the industry reorganized its effort to do it better. We formed this partnership to continue to work on this thing. And the president, Dan brought the president back into DOE. I don't know how often he comes over here, Ernie, but this was a special occasion for our CEOs, and said, we've got to do this for future storms. We've got to do it for cybersecurity. We've got to do it for physical security. And this is a model partnership. And we did that in the aftermath. And again, I think that it wouldn't have been done without Dan's leadership. So, Dan, you were not able to stop the wrath of Sandy, but you certainly did superhero efforts, and our industry will be forever grateful for that and for the ongoing partnership that exists. And Liz, we certainly look forward to working with you in the future on this too. It is truly an important issue, not only for storms but physical and cybersecurity, because electric reliability is the first order of business that we have. So again, his leadership and tireless efforts were able to make it done. It's the way Dan does everything. I think, as the general indicated, he's got the ability to get things done. So our motto is not look out, it's Spider-Man, it's look out, it's Poneman. Again, I don't think that, I understand over here you're not called the master of the disaster, you're called the night watchman, because of what Tim indicated, that you never sleep and you work all kinds of hours. Well, it turns out that the founder of our industry had a saying. He said, personally, I enjoy working 18 hours a day or more, and I only need to sleep about 4 hours a night. I think that, Dan, you must have read some of his stuff back when you were at Harvard. But we are very, very grateful. I enjoy getting emails now. My wife continues to say, who is that sending you an email at 3 o'clock in the morning? But it's always about important stuff, and again, we can't thank you enough. So we do have some mementos that we want to give to you. Here's the superhero cape that David has there, and you are definitely our superhero. And in addition to that, we have this little momentum from Hurricane Sandy. It's got the meeting with the president here. It's got the C5s, the storm, and all the trucks coming, and a note from a little child that says thank you. So Dan, thank you for everything, and we really very, very much appreciate it. You're leaving DOE, but I'm sure you're going to continue to leap tall buildings.
Well, this is quite an impressive ceremony. We had our own slightly more informal thank you to Dan at the Intelligence Community Headquarters building. We gave him some cheese and crackers, and at the end of our sitting around the table, he presented us with a very fine bottle of scotch. So we thought that we needed to step up our game and give him some official recognition. But mostly I wanted to be here today and my name, the name of the intelligence community, and Director Clapper, partly to express our appreciation for everything that DOE brings to our work, critical insights into some of the most pressing intelligence questions of the day, unparalleled scientific expertise, and shared interests on key initiatives like high-performance computing. But I also wanted to thank Dan personally for being such a great colleague and for his shared interests. Someone who shares my interests in musical items, if not my complete and utter lack of talent in the musical arena. But so Dan, just to thank you for your partnership and for DOE's partnership over the years, and in return for that wonderful bottle of scotch, which we are still enjoying, you get this medal. Thank you so much.
Special goodies for you here. Good afternoon. I'm Mark Gabriel, the administrator of the Western Area Power Administration, and I'm actually here representing all 4 power administrations and the 5,000 men and women who work every day to keep the lights on across 33,000 miles of transmission line in 25 states. When I took this job 20 months ago, I never realized that I would have a fellow sesquipedalian with me. And before you look that up, that's of course somebody like me who has a propensity for using large words, usually to the befuddlement and confusion of the audience. I also didn't realize, Dan, that you, like we use lots of quotes. Of course, mine usually come from Teddy Roosevelt, Yogi Berra, Mae West, and yours come from long-dead poets who is speaking in languages that nobody understands. But I am really impressed with that. And I'm sure, Dan, as you move on to your next adventure, you won't have any memos to worry about. Nothing to jot down. Those are some inside jokes. And probably your biggest HR challenge will be finding a student intern who's going to carry your briefcase. But I wanted to make sure, and this again is on behalf of all the PMAs, we have a couple of things for you. These are very important here. Now, safety is a big deal at the PMAs. And we know you're going to be at Harvard, and crossing the traffic is really dangerous. So this is a safety helmet from all of us. Wear this in good health. Now, I will tell you, safety helmets like milk and fish expire after 2 years. So I want to make sure that you have that to protect yourself. Also, I think extremely important, we know about your love of learning. And if you get tired of being at Harvard, we figured we would give you this lineman apprentice-in-chief vest. And so you always have a spot in our training centers across the country. And it's got all the logos on it, so you can wear this in good health. In all seriousness, no, and back to a quote I'm going to use from Teddy Roosevelt, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena. And Dan certainly has been in the arena here. Certainly your support for the PMAs has been outstanding. And again, on behalf of the 5,000 men and women in the PMAs, we'd like to thank you.
Be very afraid. I am afraid. Sir, I would like to join others in thanking you for the service that you've given to the department and the country. It has been truly a joy to work with you. There's so many characteristics that one would like to mention. Just to name a few. You all may realize that Dan has an enormous willingness to seek and understand advice, especially because you are a recovering lawyer. One of the things I've enjoyed is your single-minded focus on having the starting point and the continued attention in any policy discussion be, what should we want as the government? Are we staying true to our first principles in the position that we eventually land on? And your constant challenge of the status quo. As a lawyer, I love the status quo. It's what we stand for. But I know you felt the frustration of some of us procurement weenies as you've challenged us. We said, he doesn't understand what a cost-type contract means. But then we came to understand and appreciate your approach of wanting us to use the flexibility in the existing rules to adapt our contracts to a model that provides greater protection for the taxpayer's interest, while aligning the contractor's interest with ours. I promised Tim that I wouldn't have the Academy Award music playing before ending. So as you have said, we now say to you, I wish you fair winds and following seas, and thank you.
Wow. Thank you all for those remarks. But I have to add, and I'm a little disappointed in the staff from the General Counsel. I would have liked that she would have reminded the Deputy Secretary that any gifts that he may receive through the next couple of days could be subject to the government gift rule. So if, by chance, a bottle of nice, fine scotch makes its way into the deputy's hands, please bring it to me and I'll make sure we'll get it to the gift room, folks. You can retrieve it on sometime this weekend. Listen, we're going to, it is a true testament to the deputy to have folks from the highest levels of industry here to celebrate his accomplishments. And we went through try to build the program here, and there's so many near and dear friends and colleagues and partners from foreign countries and all over it. And he said, okay, well, maybe we can squeeze a few more folks in. But to do that would have meant that we've had to extend his time here as a deputy. And I don't think he was prepared to do that, and the system as well. But we're going to get back to the program. I would like to ask Mr. Kevin Knobloch, the DOE Chief of Staff, and Mr. Jonathan Levy, the DOE Deputy Chief of Staff, to come up for a special presentation.
Thank you, Tim. Our ongoing historic experiment in democracy and self-governance relies upon citizen leaders who periodically leave private life for public service, who see such service as a privilege and a calling, and whose varied experience prepares them to make significant public contributions. When the Secretary asked me to join his team 15 months ago, I knew that he was a citizen leader, or probably more accurately, a scientist leader. But I was really delighted to discover upon my arrival here that our long-serving Deputy Secretary also exemplifies such citizen leadership. As we all know from Dan's background, he alternated stretches of practicing law and serving as a principal in the Scowcroft Group with pivotal jobs at the National Security Council and the Department of Energy. That public-private mix led to his deep expertise in nuclear security, international energy markets, and other critical areas that he has developed along the way. But I also think that it explains his refined sense of what it means to be a public servant. He has a profound and infectious sense of honor that comes with the opportunity to serve one's country. He conveys a constant sense of awareness that we are entrusted by the American public to do this important work on their behalf. And then he establishes a high expectation that we earn and maintain that trust. Whether we're grappling with how best to advance the President's priorities, or to turn around a troubled project, and we've had a few of those, and especially if it's a difficult question, and I'm going to echo Gina here, Dan invariably asks versions of the following questions. What's possible? What's fair? What's in the public interest? What's the right thing to do? And then he doubles down with a sense of urgency and accountability. All of this has been an inspiration for a number of us who may have served earlier in our careers in government, and now deeper into our careers have been drawn to serve again, as well as to others here at the department and across the federal government who have come into government service for the first time, drawn by President Obama and other leaders here. Dan's unwavering integrity, his esprit de corps, his determination to dedicate his time in government to solving problems big and small, are traits that resonate with us and validate our decisions to serve. We've also watched his reliance upon the many talented career employees here at DOE, and his instinct that the appointees and the career professionals, when partnering to pursue national goals, make for a powerful team. And we've marveled at his ability to have fun and to laugh at some of the ironies and absurdities that land in our offices from time to time. But upon reflection, I think especially given his travel to 32 nations, from Argentina to the United Arab Emirates during his time as Deputy Secretary, Dan has by now earned the title of citizen statesman. Plato said of his beloved Athens, "This city is what it is because our citizens are what they are." The hard-charging Department of Energy under this president and this secretary is what it is, in great part because Dan Poneman is what he is. And so, in recognition of this service, it's fitting that I present, on behalf of the Secretary and the Department, 2 flags to Dan, an American flag that has flown over the U.S. Capitol, and a DOE flag that has flown over our Forrestal and Germantown facilities. Thank you.
I have a hunch those things are heavier than they look. Before I get started, I first want to say that originally I was under the impression I would get to go after Dan, which was better because then there'd be no rebuttal. I'm not going to speak from prepared remarks. I've got something I'm going to present to you that I will read, so I'll be very brief. A lot has been made of the fact that Deputy Secretary Poneman is the longest serving Deputy Secretary of Energy, but I'm here to remind him that I was here first, started 12 days before you were nominated and helped get you confirmed. And despite the fact that, as Tom had mentioned, they may refer to him as the master of the disaster on the outside, I think after traveling to 32 nations, our scheduling and advanced staff also occasionally calls him the master of disaster. And no one has received more 2 a.m. emails than I have from Dan Poneman. Yet despite that, I still not only consider him a phenomenal colleague, but also a phenomenal friend. As you would say, it's time to take off glasses and look serious. When Dan was deciding if he wanted to continue to serve into the second term of President Obama's administration, we had a lot of conversations. And one of them, he kept saying, no matter what, no matter the hard times, I still have days where I come to work and I would pay for a ticket to do the things I do, to work with the people I work with. Obviously, some that were here today, some that are here from around DOE, from around the rest of the complex, the rest of the government. And he came every day with a sense of purpose, a sense of mission, and a sense of doing what's right. And that's why I am privileged to present to him 4 letters that I'm going to read, very few of which he's aware have arrived. And these great men are going to be able to say it far better than I can. Dear Dan, many thanks for your kind invitation to attend your retirement ceremony as Deputy Secretary of Energy. And add my congratulations to those I am sure you are already receiving from the people you have worked with over the past 5 years. In particular, I want to thank you for all the great work you did in the nuclear non-proliferation area for so many years as part of my governmental affairs staff. Your efforts were instrumental and key to accomplishing the involvement we had during those years. I believe we did have a favorable impact, even though problems still persist. Again, my sincere thanks for your help during my years in the Senate, and congratulations on your continued work beyond those Senate days. We shared some great days, and I wish you the very best in whatever your future endeavors may be. Best regards, sincerely, John Glenn. Letter number 2. Dear Dan, congratulations on your retirement as the longest-serving Deputy Secretary of Energy. For the past 5 years, you have brought tremendous insight to a difficult job and helped to find the practical solutions that will leave a cleaner, more secure planet for the next generation. I know you'll be missed by your colleagues at the Department of Energy, and I join with them in extending my appreciation for a job well done. All my best wishes for continued happiness, fulfillment, and success. Sincerely, Bill Clinton. Dear Dan, Barbara and I are checking in to add our personal good wishes as you retire following an illustrious career of federal service that has spanned 13 years. The United States Department of Energy and the entire federal service is losing an outstanding public servant, but you leave with pride for having served with honor and distinction. We Bushes congratulate you and thank you for a job well done. Good luck to you in whatever lies ahead. I hope your future proves to be as challenging and rewarding as your distinguished past. Sincerely, George Bush, 41. Dear Daniel, this one's a little more formal. I extend my warmest congratulations on your retirement. It is a pleasure to join your family, friends, and colleagues in celebrating your years of federal service with the Department of Energy. Over the course of your career, you have made countless contributions to strengthening our country. I hope you take great pride in the time you have devoted to helping the federal government advance our nation's promise and meet our responsibilities to the American people. Congratulations again. I wish you all the best as you begin the next chapter of your life. Sincerely, Barack Obama.
Dan, that was the last big surprise. I know you're quite shocked. Thank you, Kevin and Jonathan. You know, it's not every day you get a letter from a sitting president, but past presidents as well. That's a nice touch. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to a man that needs no introduction, the Honorable Dr. Ernest Moniz, Secretary of Energy.
Well, thanks, Tim, and especially thanks for doing such a great job in organizing this event. Very pleased, of course, to recognize the very senior leadership in the administration that has taken part in this. Dennis McDonough, Susan Rice was here. Also, recently departed people like Ash Carter being here. It's really terrific. Thank all those who have spoken. Starting with Brent Scowcroft, my dear friend. Brent, I had the honor of having General Scowcroft introduce me in my confirmation hearing last year in the Senate. But this is already about Dan Poneman, because how do I get to meet Brent Scowcroft? It's the supreme networker, Dan Poneman. And later I'll return, in fact, to our working on publications in the Scowcroft offices to go forward. So it's really great, Brent, and Stephanie and Mark and Gina as well. Really appreciate it. I might also say that yesterday and today have been interesting in terms of the past and the future of this department. Yesterday, we had an inaugural event on our birthday, that is Department of Energy's 37th birthday, inaugurating an award named after Jim Schlesinger, our first secretary, who passed away earlier this year for energy security. And yesterday, some of those engaged, Lynn Coleman, nearly the first deputy secretary, Charlie Curtis, deputy secretary of, roughly 20 years later. Today, Dan Poneman, the longest serving deputy secretary, roughly 20 years longer. And then the future starts on Monday with Liz Sherwood Randall here, and I'll come back and comment about that as well. Really want to thank the family, as has already been done. Sharing Dan, Susie, the leader of the flower establishment of Washington, D.C., has been terrific, and of course Dan's children and Dan's mother, stepfather in from Toledo. It's really terrific, and you should believe at least the majority of what you've heard today as being on the mark. There's been various references to Dan's habits, and I think in the spirit of not trying to exercise very many of the audience, how many of you have not received an email or a phone call between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.? That's what I thought. That was the easy version of the question. But Dan and I do go back, as has already been said, back into the Clinton administration, and we traveled to Russia together on our continued joint passion in terms of the whole nuclear enterprise, nuclear energy to nuclear security. I mentioned earlier that we wrote a paper together roughly a decade ago on these subjects, and as I said, that was scratched out really in a conference room at the Scowcroft Group when Dan was there, and I might say that work continue to guide us in our work together here at DOE in the sense of looking at things like our international non-proliferation cooperation, et cetera. So it's really been something, and I'll come back to more obviously about Dan and our relationship. Again, Dan is the record holder. We've all said that. He's accomplished author, public servant. nuclear security, nuclear safety issues. Another way in which our work has been intertwined, megatons to megawatts, and we see some of our former USEC friends, the former applies to USEC, not to the friends here, in terms of this very successful megatons to megawatts program that concluded end of last year. Dan was there at the beginning, I was there at the middle, and we were both there at the end. And so that was really, really a terrific effort there. As you heard from those letters, he has served in several administrations, and that was recognized today as well. We've also heard about his musical talent. Depends on your taste, of course, in music, but his Yellow Cake Band, I first got to see on the plaza just out here in what is characteristic for Dan, serving the Feds Feed Families project. So it was really out there to raise food, in this case, for our federal drive. Then saw him again with his band, with shifting players, in an event for raising funds for breast cancer research. Joyce. So anyway, so Dan is really, he has great fun playing his music, and he's involved his family on the drums. I saw some enthusiastic drumming last year. I think his friend Skunk Baxter is here someplace. There he is. And that'll be a quiz question for many of you who should recognize the name Skunk Baxter as one of the musical inspirations for Dan Poneman. But he also managed to kind of rope in various of our current DOE colleagues, Jonathan Levy, pounding on the drums, for example, John McWilliams, Julio Friedman, all kind of getting pulled into Dan's little orbit there of playing music to good purpose. So that's really been terrific. At the department, again, you've heard a number of things he's done at the department. Another one that I'll just mention is that really being chairman of a very important committee that was set up, the Credit Review Board. So we have this loan program. We've put out $30 billion of loans. We have $40 billion to go. There were some rough times. We all know the Solyndra stories early on. But the fact is, and we are always out there talking about, this program has been a tremendous success. As a portfolio. It has driven the development of new technologies and their deployment in this country, utility scale photovoltaics being one example. And really the issue, especially in light of something like Solyndra, where we know in a portfolio not every investment is supposed to work out, but addressing the risk and reviewing the creditworthiness of projects, et cetera, absolutely critical. I just want to say this. So Dan was very much engaged in all of that. We've already heard reference, so I won't go through it again, but in terms of the response to various emergencies, Dan was very much the leader here with Fukushima, with Sandy, and you heard that from Tom, for example. He's the only person we believe in the history of the department, certainly the only deputy secretary to chair meetings in yellow jerseys and biking shorts. It's really very attractive. I won't get into his using his use of my towels. We will leave that one. We will leave that one aside. But we got over it. We're good. As also mentioned, Dan does various Ironmans, half Ironmans, and everyone seems to be very impressed. But to tell you the truth, he just told me in his last one how relieved he was that the swim portion was canceled. It really helps. Anyway, when I go around, and here today we see many people from the department's past, the department's current, I think tremendous staff. As we see here, many industry leaders, those from other parts of government. As I've gone around, I cannot tell you how many times I hear, boy, Dan Poneman is a great guy. And that's, I think, spoken at the personal level and also at the professional level. And I want to emphasize, Dan, those that were said both before and after you announced your departure from DOE. So I take that as a good sign. I might also say, in addition to industry and again government and civil society, we also have, it was mentioned earlier, people here from the international sphere, and I see at least 2 ambassadors, I think, Emirates and Kazakhstan. There may be others. I apologize if I haven't seen you, but it's again something that Dan has been incredible in terms of maintaining relationships, chairing a whole bunch of energy dialogues with other countries, and I think always viewed as doing so in a way of trying to make real progress in collaborations. Very, very different countries, very different continents, but always with that theme. So it's really been terrific. So we're going to be, as obviously we're wishing Dan a fond farewell as far as the Department of Energy goes. We don't expect that he's going to go very far. However, in terms of engagement with us and advising us, and as I mentioned earlier, Liz Sherwood-Randall here in the front row will be picking up the torch on Monday morning. But what I want to say again is I think Dan Poneman has gone out of his way to make this a seamless transition, stretching out his stay a little bit longer, and I should have said earlier, stretching out his stay a lot longer, because when I took office here, frankly, before I took office with Dan, I asked him to stay at least an extra year, so that, again, with our known good working relationship, he could help me hit the ground running, and Dan has done that not only for a year, but now for an additional, I don't know, third plus of a year. So very, very grateful to that, and both Liz and I will, I'm sure, keep drawing upon him for his advice and the results of his experience there. I should also have said Alison McFarland, the head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, again, part of the way we work across government, very much appreciated as well. Dan is now at least going off to part-time to Harvard to start writing. I see a lot of Harvard influence in this front row. Nevertheless, you can't account for taste. But certainly those of us at MIT appreciate collaboration with the Divinity School up the river. So we will have a good time, Dan, even after you're gone. So finally, that moves me to some additional opportunities for recognition of his leadership, the high standards, dedication he's brought to public service, and so we will present him with the Secretary's Exceptional Service Award. We need at least 2 people to carry it. All right. And then there is the piece that goes with this. With the seal and your signature. And the signature, that's right. unless I'm doing something wrong, I'm just going to introduce Dan. Dan, you're up. Wow. All right, I'll stay. You talked me into it. That's not my talking points. And I'm really sorry about the towels. I didn't know you were coming in that day. It's been, it's true. It is true. It's been an incredible ride. And I was going to say that the one word that really comes most to mind to me right now is gratitude. And I do feel that, but I gotta say humbled, because I am just blown away, to use a technical term, that so many people have come out, and really it is all about teamwork. And anything and everything that we've ever done has only been done through teamwork. And the fact that everybody, as I sometimes say to my mother, I'm the only person here I don't recognize. If I started telling stories about everybody here that we've done things together with, we would be here all day. So I won't do that, but I will start where I have to start, which is with my family, and to say thank you. By definition, they were with me from the beginning. My mother and my stepfather, Jeff Dunn, who came in from Toledo, Ohio. And my late father lived long enough to get to see me work for General Scowcroft. He'd be very happy to be here today. And I'm so blessed and so proud of my immediate family, my wife Susie, and my daughter Claire, and my sons Michael and William. And yes, William is the founding drummer of Yellow Cake, it's true. And I'm just so grateful to you, and you're the best. And you saw something about Dennis McDonough, who understands the sacrifice that you have made, and I'm deeply, deeply in your debt. I have been blessed all along with teachers and mentors, and some of them are here, and I'm really touched. You know, Senator Glenn, that was my first break, you see, because I was a kid from Ohio, and I knew I liked government, and so I applied. I got an internship, and I was really good at my job there. Once you get the hang of it, these auto pens just work really well. And I was down there working away at the auto pen, and I asked the legislative director, I said, could you give me a research project? He said, on what? I said, on anything. and he says, yeah, well, why don't you look into this NPT thing? I said, I'm all over that. So I went down to the Congressional Research Service Annex. He didn't have Google. And I'm like flipping through books, and it took me the rest of the day. Turns out NPT stands for Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And that's how it happened. And I've been doing it for the last 40 years. So I've been lucky, and I got another break. Because I know it's going to surprise a lot of you. I say I'm a recovering lawyer. I wasn't exactly, no offense to any lawyers out there, super thrilled with my legal practice. And so for the first 5 years, I spent 4 years of it looking for another job. And I finally got one, and it was this neat thing called the White House Fellowship. I get to go to government. I'm already, by this time, a foreign policy junkie. And so I got skunked. I got absolutely skunked. I wanted to go to the Pentagon. I couldn't go to the Pentagon. I wanted to go to the State Department. I couldn't go to the State. You know what they did? They stuck me at the Department of Energy. So, you know, who could know that it turns out that you can't plan these things. And when I left the Department of Energy, I got another lucky break, because you're supposed to leave the White House Fellowship and go back to the private sector. But this passion for nonproliferation had already infected me, and I got to go work for General Brent Scowcroft, who was and is my mentor and hero in so many ways. And the thing I remember most about Brent is something we've already heard here today, which is Brent always said, figure out the right thing to do, and then persuade people that it is the right thing to do. And never, ever start with what you think is practical or feasible or expedient and back into the least bad option that's left. And I try to live by that every single day, and I think we should acknowledge Brent's great leadership.
And we're surrounded by so many of my dear friends from the Department of Energy. I admit, I love this place. I love the people here. I have a few hours left to say I invite you. So I'm going to use my power to say I invite you. Go to any of our labs, go to any of our production facilities, go to the headquarters, go to Germantown, and you will find people who care, who are passionate, who love what they do, and who are only here to make a difference. As our late departed friend, many of you will remember Arnie Cantor used to say about government service, the hours are long, but at least the pay is low. So they're only doing the right thing for the right reasons, and God bless them for what they do every day. Thank you, DOE. I have some special words for my immediate staff, Mr. McLeese and others. We're known as the B-side, not only because we have this thing about music trivia, but because that's the corridor. We're on the B corridor. And so for all that you guys have done, including all of the surprises when I wasn't in on the takeoff and the slideshow with the embarrassing pictures, and to suborn my family to support this enterprise, I just want you all to know you're fired. No, they're terrific. They're terrific. I'm grateful to Secretary Steve Chu, who gave me my first chance at this incredible job. I am deeply grateful to my friend, we used to call him Ernie, Mr. Secretary, teacher, colleague, mentor, and now he's my boss. We have traveled together, and it was in Russia that I found out about his extraordinary baseball skills, which I will not go into in great detail today. When Ernie, now Secretary Moniz, got here, he said, and more than once, we're going to have fun, and we're going to get stuff done. And we have, and we have. So thank you, Secretary Moniz. I'm so grateful to my interagency colleagues, many of who have been here today, and it's so like my dear friend, and he's going to be one more week than I am, Deputy Secretary Bill Burns. He's hiding in the back. I saw him back there. I used to work for his father. She's my soon-to-be successor, dear friend, Liz Sherwood Randall. I could not be happier. I felt so good, and I told Dennis McDonough, I said, you know what, that you would pick Liz Sherwood Randall, that says you view DOE essential to our foreign policy and national security apparatus. And he said, you broke the code. So welcome, Liz. Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie O'Sullivan, you heard from Avril Haines was here. It's like a little family. The deputies, we spent hours and hours together. Wendy Sherman was here. I couldn't be more grateful. I've learned so much from these people, and if I've left out any I haven't seen, Richard Reed was here. He's the one who actually brought us emergency response before we knew how to spell it. And I'm so touched and moved that Susan Rice should take time in the middle of trying to fight so many problems around the world to join us. I'm very deeply moved. And one of the best things about this job is it's just as much domestic as it is international. And Dennis, who's been a great leader on both sides of the House, and John Podesta, who is here. And it's just been, I saw Steve Ricchetti in the back at one point working for the Vice President. If I've missed anybody, I apologize. It's just really been a real pleasure. And one more word about Dennis. You saw two important things about him here. One is, and I know how devoted he is to Addie and Liam and Teddy and Carrie, his wonderful family, but he gets it when he knows the importance of family, and he never forgets it. And I think Michael will remember getting drenched in a downpour at Hoss Cartwright's house, and the nicest guy to him in the whole joint was Dennis McDonough. And the other thing is, when he was talking about the 3 days we spent without sleeping in Vienna, you know who was shooting little BlackBerry messages, like just when you're about to pass out? Like, keep it up, I know it's a marathon. It was Dennis. So as I heard some people say about President Bush 41, I would walk through fire. For that man. He's been just such a hero. You've heard about our great foreign partnerships. We do have some more ambassadors from Kuwait, Ambassador Al-Sabah, Ambassador Rasul Gandalovich, Ambassador Bartushka, a special appearance, and of course our dear friend Yusuf Al-Otaiba, and representing the British, where's Amanda? Amanda Downs is here. It's been just a great partnership, and what we do is so
important to be supported by our partners around the world. And I have to say a word, I do see Steve is still there. The Vice President has been a great leader on some of these job skills training. A few weeks ago, I got to go down to Oak Ridge for this wonderful, fascinating 3D manufacturing. There's a guy there, Joe Grabanowski, who was the most severely bilaterally amputated veteran who has survived his wounds. And he inspired the creation of a course for veterans to learn 3D manufacturing. So all in one single enterprise, you have this grievously wounded hero who inspires the creation of a whole course that now all these other veterans are enjoying to create new jobs and cutting-edge 3D manufacturing. Is this a great country or what? This is the kind of thing, I would buy a ticket. I'd still buy a ticket to go get to do the things that we have had that great opportunity to do. I'm so grateful to the President for the opportunity to serve, and it's true. That 10-day period, whatever it was, I got witnesses. During Hurricane Sandy, he led, and we did things. The story that you heard about the bucket trucks, do you know how hard it is to get a bucket truck from California to the East Coast? And Tom Kuhn knows. And I was being told, it's actually much more efficient to drive them. Yeah, because by the time you tie down the buckets and you put them on the skid, and so President makes that comment. Within 24 hours, we had C-17s and C-5s revving up and flying those bucket trucks. It's been a gas. The DOE team has supported the President in his incredible vision of our nuclear future, a vision that so many people here have worked so hard to advance. They are investing in our deterrent to keep it safe, secure, and effective. They're removing dangerous nuclear materials out of harm's way, working very hard to implement the article that Secretary Moniz and I and Arnie Cantor and John Deutsch wrote to create a new civil framework. And we're going to get that Blue Ribbon Commission, Brent, and we're going to get a back-end solution. And Allison McFarland has just been such a leader in that. And I also have to say, in taking our show on the road, I've seen Lee Zack and some of our other friends, Fred Hochberg and Elizabeth Littlefield, always advancing American interests. In short, the President's all of the above program has been working, and you all have been more than patient and more than gracious in listening to me, and I just got to say, it's been a tremendous honor, a tremendous privilege. I'm excited to go back to the very program I used to take notes at as a work-study student back in 1975, and to get to think and write, and yeah, maybe even buy a ticket to come back and see you all from time to time and talk about the things that we've worked so hard to do. So thank you, everyone, the partnerships we've had. I will not detain us longer by reciting every person here that I know, because we'll be here all night, but the industry, the unions, the NGOs, our government colleagues, our international partners, thank you all for this wonderful send-off, for your friendship, for your partnership. I wish you every success, and I am confident that you'll achieve it, and my ex-deputy, Ash Carter, and our other deputy secretaries who are here, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I believe, I'm told there's some refreshment that will follow this event, and I want to just say thank you very much. All the American people have benefited from the great work and the teamwork that people at this room have been so inspirational, so central to advancing, and indeed, all the people here and all the people around the world will be that much the better for it. Thank you all, and God bless. And could I ask my family to come up, please? Okay, good. Okay. Lovely.
Thank you. That concludes our ceremony. Please enjoy the refreshments, and please invite the VIPs to the northwest corner of the room where you can share a few additional words with the Deputy Secretary and his family. Thank you for coming, and have a pleasant evening.